what I teach teams who are internal to organizations is be consultants for the business, right? Partner with them in the same way, to try and bridge that gap, to try and bring them together so that they're working together. Frankly, I don't care if a team is agile or waterfall or extreme programming or any of that. All of these principles that they laid out apply regardless. People in the agile community might not be too happy with me saying that, but it's true, right? You can apply all these principles regardless of the process that you use. Because at the end of the day, you're just trying to get to that value.
Welcome to the Forward Slash, where we lean into the future of IT. I'm your host, Aaron Chesney, with my beautiful co-host, James Carmen. And today we have with us Tracy Beeson. I didn't mispronounce that today. That one's a hard one to mispronounce, so that was kind of a softball pitch. Tracy has worked on or with Agile teams since 2002. She started her career in software as QA and has worked in consumer experience, business analysis, and project management. She has an undergrad degree in computer science, an MBA, and is currently working as the Director of Transformation at Health Alliance Plan, or HAP, or HAP. I think we always used to call it HAP. So,
HAP.
Yep.
Tell me you have a newsletter that it says the happenings or something. There has to be some cutesy thing there.
I don't think so.
Well,
not that I'm aware of.
Welcome, Tracy. And so today we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about not talking about Agile. Which reminds me, I used to be really good at agility, but there was always this one border collie I couldn't beat on the course. So I had to retire without ever beating that one border collie. It was the weave poles. I couldn't navigate the weave poles fast enough.
They're really good.
I couldn't twist my spine like that border collie could.
They're like a snake. Those border collie.
So anyways, welcome, Tracy. And so how are we not going to talk about Agile?
Well, I mean, I think maybe let's take a step back. So we met Tracy, one of our folks, actually our producer, our editor, went to a conference, and Tracy gave a talk about, stop saying Agile, something along those lines. And I was like, wow, I need to hear this whole thing. I wasn't at the conference, unfortunately, but I was like, I want to hear all about this. So that's why I invited Tracy on to talk about that.
I think I was in that section too, as well, because I went to the same conference.
Okay.
Oh, you were.
And I think that was one of the lectures I went to, because I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it all began because, quite frankly, I had been watching my LinkedIn feed, and I kept seeing all of these questions that people would post to the Agile forums, and they were valid questions, like, how do you do this, or what's the goal here? And then 50 people or more would chime in of, well, you need to do this in your Scrum process, or you're doing this part of the process incorrectly, and it was just this roll of all these debates around process. And I have to admit, when I decided to write a presentation to speak at the Agile and Beyond conference, I sort of was reading that and said, we need to stop talking about Agile. And that's where this all began, because we get so caught up in the mechanics of the process, we forget the whole point of what we're trying to do in the first place. So that's really the gist of the presentation and where it came from. I'll fully admit that during the conference, I went to about 3 other presentations that were all saying similar things. And so I was rewriting the presentation in real time to kind of piggyback off of what others were also saying.
Well, and your talk was one of the few that wasn't based on AI, trying to replace developers. So that
Yeah,
was it was a nice refreshing change to that. So I caught a couple sections like that weren't focused because that was when the big scare of AI replacing all the
yep.
developers was going on. So hearing about this was a good topic. Um so with this, like, what's the focus of not trying to talk about agile?
Yeah, so it's really I describe it as we got to get back to the basics for why this whole movement came about in the first place. Um, and so I really, when I coach teams and talk to organizations about Agile, one of the first things that I often do is say, have you read the manifesto? Right? Because nowhere in the manifesto does it say, thou shalt have ceremonies, right? You need to have planning every 2 weeks or whatever it is. The manifesto is trying to build the best way to describe it is a way of thinking, right, into the system. And if you really look at it and really read the words that they have listed, it's not about process at all. In fact, you could apply, and I've been having these conversations with my employees lately, my coaches in particular. You could apply the teachings of from the Agile Manifesto to any process that you choose to do. It's just good practice for building software. And so I think we have a bit of a brand issue, if you will, when it comes to Agile. We've build it as a magic solution that will fix everything. It will deliver faster. It will deliver better, right? It'll meet user needs, all those things that businesses want to hear, and in particular, managers want to hear because that's what they're being held accountable for. And in reality, it's not the process that will get you there. It, it, the process is important. I don't want to, I don't want anybody to walk away from this podcast and say, Tracy said, you know, forget process, because that's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is process is the means to the end, but it's not the purpose. And I do think we've lost that along the way. Um,
Yeah, it's one of the things that I try and tell people, and I on a regular basis will go back and review the manifesto just to make sure I'm like
yeah,
resetting my thinking, when I'm talking with other people, because it's more of a philosophy or a mindset than it is an instruction manual.
right.
And I have the same issue with DevOps too. People think DevOps is like a team or process or that kind of thing, but it's really just a mindset. It's more in that realm of things, and reminding people of that nowhere in the manifesto does it say Scrum, Kanban, or Safe.
Right,
Those words don't
right.
exist in the manifesto, right? Those are the ways you're implementing your process to allow for this group think, this, in facilitating that mindset.
Yep, yep. Um, in preparation for this conversation today, I actually was thinking about my past experiences in Agile, kind of going all the way back to when I was a novice, right? Um, so when I started Agile, it was 2002. I mean, I was so naive, I didn't even realize that it was practically brand new in the industry, right? Um, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I recall distinctly I landed myself on an agile team. We were a small team. We had some dysfunction that we were dealing with. I'll just call it dysfunction. And I went to a conference and I went up to one of the speakers at the conference who was seemingly well known. I forget who exactly. I'm sure it was actually one of the bigger names. that we know today. And I described whatever problem we were having on my team, and he just looked at me and said, "Well, it's because you're doing it wrong." And that was his answer. And that
Oh,
was,
okay.
it just ended there. And I just, as a novice, right, in that moment, I was like, but like, what do I do with that? And he's like,
Yeah.
well, you're just doing it wrong. Um,
I may have told somebody that before. You're just doing
and
it wrong.
right,
Yeah.
and I get it, right? And I may have used words quite similarly in my career as well. But perhaps time and experience factors into all of this. But at the end of the day, so often the business comes, and I watch these teams, the business comes and says, but I need to get this done because I need to, I need access to my data, or I need this feature or function to be delivered because we're trying to gain members, or we're trying to get some value out of it, whatever that value is. And the team is like, well, let's talk about the Scrum process, right? Like, let's talk about the ceremonies, and let's this is what planning is for. And the business is just like, I don't care, right? When do I get my stuff? When do I get my
Exactly.
value?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I think, when you talk about Agile in that way, you're kind of dragging it through the mud, and then the business starts to lose its appetite for
absolutely,
oh, no, we
absolutely,
don't want to do Agile. Jeez, oh Pete, we never get anything done when we do Agile, because
absolutely.
they associate Agile with the process.
Yep. And it's slow, right? Because the team was like, well, let me talk about story points. And if we look at all the sprints and we write out all the stories, and then we can calculate the story points, and then maybe we can kind of get to when we'll deliver this in numbers of sprints. And by the time you've gone through that whole logic, the business is checked out, right? Because again, they just want to know, what date are you going to deliver this?
Or how
In the
much it's going to
worst,
cost,
or how much
right?
it's going to
Yep.
cost, right? And the worst case scenario are the teams that say, oh, we're agile, we can't answer those questions, which I have heard, right?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
So we shoot ourselves in the foot by not actually speaking to what the business cares about and helping them understand how the process, or how the thinking, right, the mindset can get us there. And we get caught up in the mechanics of the right or wrong, or Scrum says this or Scrum says that. We get caught up in that, and we forget to flex what we need, what we're doing in order to meet those needs for the business. And I think that's the trick of it all is, and the reason why the manifesto never said thou shalt have ceremonies was because they were really trying to say, flex your process for what the team needs, for what the business needs, for the dynamic, for the work that you're doing, the nature of the work. All of that factors in to what the process itself winds up being. But at the end of the day, you're trying to line it all up with the same set of values of, hey, we care about our people, we care about our customer, right? We're trying to get this work out as quickly as possible so that we can learn from it and do something better the next time. Like, that's really why we're here. That's really why we ended up doing Agile. Um, it's not the rest of it is just a means to the end.
One thing
Yeah,
that's
and one of
interesting.
the things that I try in with like people that are struggling to communicate up the chain on things. I try to tell them, I'm like, you got to think about it as a business person. There's two major categories of business: nonprofit and for profit. And so the whole reason for the business is to make profit. That's what makes everybody happy, is when a business is producing profit. So you have to translate what you're doing into dollars. And if you can do that and have that conversation and relate it back to dollars, now you're on the same playing field. You're playing with the same rules and you're talking their language, right? If they can't do that, if there's a disconnect between, I can't translate this into dollars, which or time, which time is money, as the old saying goes, right? So again, that translates back to money. Then you've got a communication gap that you've got to try and cross.
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of teams where the engineers will say, I don't want to care, I don't want to think about all of that. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it, right? Um, or the business that doesn't want to necessarily help the team understand the why behind what we're doing, right? So they kind of take on the stance of, I told you what solution I want, just build the solution I want, right? Just do what I say. And while I can appreciate both of those sentiments, what it actually is doing is undercutting the team's ability to help be part of the solution, right? To help create that dialogue around, how does this actually relate to dollars? How can we work the problem so that it does actually meet the needs of the business in a faster way? Which again, going back to the principles of Agile, that's what they were trying to get at. That's what they were trying to teach us to do, was to dare to have those conversations and not do this as a top down, just do what I say. Okay, I'll just shut up and do what you say. And instead have a richer conversation around what we're trying to do, what problem we're trying to solve, why are we trying to solve that problem, and then let's work together to get there, and figure out how best to do that. So it's like, of course, companies now 20 some odd years later would be like, this isn't working, right? Agile is a problem. Of course, we're now in the state where we're industry-wise collectively throwing this out the window almost, because we never really got to the point of it all, which was, let's collaborate. And I mean, not just say the word collaborate, but actually collaborate on the solution and innovate together.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've always pegged as a high functioning team, is when they have that predictability where the business knows exactly the amount of workload that this team can accomplish in a given time frame, so that scope can be adjusted to say, okay, based on the numbers, based on what this team can do in this 3 months, we should be able to get this, this, and this. And then asking the team, do you guys agree? And it's like, okay, well, let's go
Yeah.
take a look at that. And they come back and go, yeah, that work looks like it fits within this time frame for our team. And that's always kind of the conversation that you want. You don't want to have that top down, this is what you're going to do and this is when you're going to give it to
Right.
me, because they're going to be like, you don't know anything about the technology. You don't know all the hurdles. You don't know what it takes to do this. So how can you say it's going to be done by this time with this functionality? It doesn't work that way. So and that's really what I get out of the Agile, is it's empowering a team to be able to say, this work won't fit in this time frame the way that you're asking for it. Now here's maybe a couple different solutions that may get you to where you need, or can we trim the fat? Is there some things here that maybe aren't as important? Can we prioritize this? And have those healthy negotiations and conversations between the team and the management.
I agree. The problem that often is the case for why teams can't have those conversations is because it's not safe. And uh, I mean, people don't like hearing that because, oh, of course my organization is a safe place. Of course they can tell me, and managers will say all the right words and they intend all the right things, but that doesn't actually make it true, right? So the minute you have any hint, any hint from the business or the top of the organization that if the team were to push back and say, we can't get all of this done, that's when the trust and the ability to have those effective conversations goes away almost immediately, right? And so it becomes uh, the soft skill, the people issue that nobody wants to talk about. That's the harder problem to solve, right? And leaders, I mean, they're being held accountable to delivering these things. So they're under the gun. They're under pressure. And so it just it all kind of falls apart really quickly. Now, what I often teach teams that I work with is rely on the facts, right? So lay out the facts, lay out options, right? Tell your leaders, look, you asked for X, Y, and Z. X will take this long, Y will take this long, Z will take this long, right? We could do these combinations, we could do these combinations, we could dial X down a little bit and then fit all three in. It could look like this, it could look like that. You don't want to lay out too many options, but if you rely on the facts and you piece it out, and in the process of doing that, you have to then also consider what is the most important thing to the business. Then you can have a much more effective conversation. You're not telling the business no, right? You're saying, well, yes, and here's how we get there.
You have been a consultant before. Yes, and
Yeah,
yeah.
I have.
You know the tricks of the trade.
I do.
And if this is really important to you, here's some ways that you might be able to get that.
Right.
Well,
Yep.
I think one of the biggest things that I see in organizations, and Tracy, you do coaching, so I'm sure you see this, is anytime we start to talk about the business, I mean, I think that's just a red flag immediately. Like that shows that you're not cohesive together as one team. And I know we've talked about the manifesto, but the very first thing is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Like the very first thing they say is like it's important to collaborate, as you were saying,
Right.
collaborate with each other, interact with each other, individuals and interactions over the processes and tools. But we come in from the process side all the time. It's like, well, but did you have your daily stand up? Did you do your planning meeting? Did you do, like we get very litigious about it. And that, I don't know, the way I always phrase it is like the brainy Smurfs, right? That's kind of natural for every time you learn something new, you're kind of you want to do it by the book, and you're like, okay, but the book says to do this, and I always say the brainy Smurfs. Papa Smurf always says, right? That thing. That's how I think of people who are, that's what always is in my mind. But how have we not evolved? Like Agile's been around for a long time. Why are we still brainy Smurfs? Like we should have evolved past that phase where we've learned, like, okay, the book doesn't like work perfectly every single time, and there are nuances, and there's ways to do that differently. How have we not evolved?
Yeah. Have you heard of the competency scale? Now, I can't remember the lower levels of the scale, so I'm not going to try to repeat it here off the top of my head, but there's a point on the scale called unconsciously competent, right? So the idea of the scale is like when you're learning, you don't know what you don't know, right? In the beginning, you don't know what you don't know. Then you start to learn and you get a little bit, you kind of start to pick it up, right? And there's some middle portion of the scale where you're getting it. And then there's a point where you hit unconsciously competent. And the problem with unconsciously competent is you're so good at it you can't explain it, right?
Uh-huh.
You can't bring it into your consciousness to explain what you mean. And I've thought about this a lot, and I do think collectively we are possibly at unconscious competence, in that those who have been doing this, those of us who've been doing this for 20 plus years, we get it. We see the problems in our head. We know what we're trying to do with these organizations or teams when we're working with them. We're not always very good at bringing really what we mean into consciousness to be able to explain it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so the top of the scale, right, of the competencies is conscious competence, where you really, as an expert in whatever topic, you have to kind of step back, think about it, learn how to explain it, and then teach. And
Yeah.
so that may not be quite what you were looking for in terms of my answer to your question, but I do think there's a little bit of that going on in our industry that, you know, it kind of goes back to that guy when I was a novice who was like, well, you're just doing it wrong, right? He was clearly unconsciously competent in that moment and probably could have given me a better answer, but didn't.
Or maybe he couldn't. Maybe he
Or
was
maybe he
good
couldn't,
at doing it and
right?
didn't know how to tell you how to do it, but he still was
Yep.
just doing it wrong.
Yep. And he could have been at a different point in time in the scale. And I just, as a novice, assumed that he knew or must know. Um,
I have a guess who that was. I'll run that by you.
yeah.
I think I know who that might be. But I think that's an interesting concept. I mean, you think about, like, I was just trying to think what would be a good analogy. Like, if you tried to describe to someone how to, like, the very specific things you do while you're driving a car, right? Like, most of us, the layperson, probably can't do that. But somebody who's a driving instructor who does it for a living, they probably do know. Oh, hand over hand. Like, you're explaining very, very meticulously how you go about doing these maneuvers and everything. But we wouldn't be able to do it. We can do it, but we can't tell you how we do it. It's interesting.
Yeah, I've had my son do that as to me before. It's like, I'm like, how are you doing that? And he's like, I don't know, I just do it. And that's kind of that I was like, I don't know how to explain it. I just do it.
Yep. I think behind, this presentation, for me, it's been a journey, right? And I've spent so many years helping these teams and watching these teams, and the pattern is always the same, right? And we know it, and we know the struggles that inevitably you get the business, because you're right, going back to the why is it like business against, um, and I've been on the consulting side where we're the experts that come in and just magically know everything, and the business is hiring us to solve all their problems. Um, what I teach teams who are internal to organizations is basically be consultants for the business, right? Partner with them in the same way, to try and bridge that gap, to try and bring them together so that they're working together. But it all is to go back to your roots, and why are we even trying to do this in the first place? Frankly, I don't care if a team is agile or waterfall or extreme programming or any of that. All of these principles that they laid out apply regardless. And
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah,
people in
absolutely.
the agile community might not be too happy with me saying that, but it's true, right? You can apply all these principles regardless of the process that you use. Because at the
Yeah,
end of the day, you're just trying to get to that value.
I think it's interesting. Like, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop in the industry. It feels like we tried a lot of these things that you just outlined a lot of it, right? So there's there's extreme programming, which started, and then everybody signed the Agile Manifesto, and then everything came up like the Scrum and all of these different things, and then we've got lean manufacturing, and then
Yeah.
now we've got product, and so there's a
Yeah.
lot of things like kind of just swirling around right now, and they're all starting to kind of, try to combine together to create this kind of Voltron of how we build software. All these different methodologies combining to make one Uber methodology. But it's interesting that there's this pushback against, like, well, don't do the Agile thing. To what end? Like, what's the alternative? I mean, we're not going back to waterfall. Everybody knows that. Nobody's advocating for that. But it's like, so we just stop doing anything and just, well, I'll just figure it out as we go. What's the new hotness? What's the next big thing?
I've been asked this question more than once, and I don't have a magic answer. I'll be honest with you. I do think it has to lie somewhere in thinking of these things as more of tools in a tool belt, right? That really what we're building up is a different set of tools with different sets of skills, right? With different uses and different value add. And the teams that are going to be most successful are the ones who can evaluate what they need and apply the right tools in the combination that makes the most sense, that at the end of the day stays focused on don't burn out your people, people over process, right? All of those good things. And on top of that, speaks to the business and gets to that value.
Yeah, I've actually spent a lot of brain cycles on this as well, and I think you both have said this about that disconnect between business and developers, and I think the next thing is going to be something that promotes that like one world kind of vision of we are all on the same team and we all work together to get something done. It's like the global economy of development, right? So there is no us and them. It is
Yep.
we are moving together as one, and it's going to be some kind of methodology like that I think is going to replace Agile with the one world scenario of we are all working together and this is how we need to think about things so that we're on the same page and moving together forward collectively instead of
Yep.
as individual departments and groups.
Right. If you think about it, the industry moves so fast, right? Technology is changing faster than we can blink. On top of that, companies that are trying to employ tech solutions, they can't just, it's not a world where you can just do it once and then let that thing live for 30 years, right? Of all of our collective industry experience, I'd be willing to guess there may be a handful of projects that we've worked on that would fall into that category of do it and then never touch it again, right? So the reality of the business that we're in and the world that we're in is that there's always going to be change happening in front of us. In order for a business to stay relevant, they have to be changing and innovating. And so if you can line up the thinking, right? If you can apply the scientific method, if you can kind of get people to realize that really ultimately that's what we're trying to do, then build a process that meets that need, whatever it needs to look like.
I was going to say, are the failings primarily around scale? Because I think if you got a group of people together, 10, 12 total people, and you're like, let's build a software product. I think we've got that figured out. I think if you've got people that are like, oh, it'd be great if it does this and all that. Like, I think we've got that sub-optimized in that size of a group. I think where things start to go off the rails is when now we've got another group of those 12 and another group, and they need to depend on those interdependencies, and you got the scaled agile framework, and that's where people, I think, the most visceral reaction to the anti-agile is when scaled agile came into the world, and that seems to be the the tipping point where everybody's like, stop this. This is outrageous. This is too much. Stop doing this. Is it just a matter of scale, or is there something else underlying there?
I do think you're right, and that scale does have something to do with this. And I do agree. I mean, scaled when I looked at the scaled agile framework for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, because it has great intent, but it missed the point, in my uh, humble opinion. But yeah, I think it's like we overthought it. When again, going back to the manifesto, they were like, just keep it simple, right? Like, it doesn't have to be this complicated. Just keep it simple. You have a product. If you need to slice the product up, maybe one team can keep this one product going. Maybe you need to slice the product up into pieces and parts and have multiple teams. Maybe some of those teams need to coordinate with each other. Maybe they don't. So talk it through. And whatever you come up as the right answer today has to be okay for it to not be the right answer tomorrow if things change.
Yeah, I think from the software engineering side, we've tried to tech our way through this, right? So do you think of like microservices and event-driven systems? So you put these layers of abstractions between pieces of software for one, but it's between people, right? I don't think we've mastered that art of thinking about. I mean, you hear about the Conway's law and all of that sort of stuff, right? But I don't think we've mastered the art of those abstractions between people to the degree that we need to. If everybody's doing the microservices thing. Okay, split everything up into microservices, and then everybody has to add the features of their microservice at the exact same time because we're
Yep.
going to release it all together. Well, you could just get a distributed monolith at that point, right? That's not solving the problem. So I
Right.
think that we're starting with event driven systems. We're using messaging and all of that sort of thing. That's helping. Microservices helping, but it's not. It can't be the only thing. Because I think from a technology standpoint, we figured out the isolation and that sort of thing. We understand that with domain driven design, and a lot of these things they're focusing on that. But I think it's maybe the people aspect of that hasn't fully landed yet. Maybe that's it. I don't know. That seems like where we're lacking for sure.
So
Yeah,
I used to have a boss who would say, software would be easy if it weren't for the people.
Amen.
And I laugh, right? And he was a very highly intelligent man who just often saw the world differently than the rest of us, which I appreciated. But I think he was right. I mean, we we blame the process first because it's easy to blame. But at the end of the day, a lot of these problems are people problems, right? We all have
Mm-hmm.
to work together, and we have emotions and feelings, and engineers really love to get in touch with their feelings. Sorry, that was some sarcasm.
I
Um,
picked up on it. So I'm sitting there going,
but
"What are you talking about?"
and right, and it's uncomfortable, right? It is an uncomfortable topic for anybody, no matter who you are. And yet that's often the thing that's really getting in our way.
yeah, and if you've ever worked on a startup project, where there are very few people between the top of the food chain and the bottom of the food chain, then that communication always flows openly in those small groups. And then as it gets bigger, that starts to break down more and more because you get more separation from the top and the message isn't clear. You kind of get that telephone or grapevine effect of the message from the top doesn't always translate to the bottom. And if in it breaks down, and so then when you get into like the massive enterprise companies, like your blue chip companies, there's so much distance from from what the strategic goals of the company are to the individual developer, is that it's almost just like you're getting a list of instructions and you have
Yep.
no idea how it plugs in to the the goals of the company as a whole. And I think that's where the issue of scale comes in, is that separation from, the top down in the size of the company. And one of the things, it was, I don't know if it was like a movement or it was just like this one company's philosophy or something like that, but the idea of having startups within your enterprise, right?
Yes. Yeah, I am fond of this idea. Startup companies, so I've worked with large organizations and I've worked with tiny little startups. Startup companies have two advantages. One is what you're talking about, is the distance between, the head of the company and the where the ideas get generated to where the ideas actually have to play out is much shorter. Um, the other is they don't have the budget to mess around, right? So those two things combined force a startup to utilize their resources in the best way that they possibly can. When you only have 5 people on your team, then all 5 of those people have to know the business inside out and backwards, because you simply don't have the bandwidth to, the CEO or whoever the founder is doesn't have the bandwidth to do all the thinking for them. So you have to enable the team to help with the thinking, right? To help with the problem solving. When you get into large scale organizations, the distance between the ideas being generated and the people who have to do the work is significant. Um, Oftentimes, the people doing the work have no idea why, right? No idea why. Um, and so they're no longer armed with being able to really partner on the solution in the way that a business would need. And on top of that, there is seemingly sometimes infinite budget, right? So the sunk cost reasoning factors in, and uh, the organization will just start throwing money at the problem. And that doesn't actually get to a better end either, oftentimes, which I think is perhaps another thing that I might be very blunt about. And people might not like me calling it out, but it's true. When you throw money at a problem, you're not necessarily getting the best solution. Whereas if you had tight resources, then you're actually more apt to innovate and come up with solutions that really work within those constraints.
Yeah, and sometimes that the form of that is like, oh, we'll just put more people on it too. And
Yeah,
with it, when you only have 5 people, you can't do that either. It's that whole problem of, oh, well, if we have 9 women, we can make a baby in 1 month, right?
right,
You can't do that. It takes this
right.
long to do it, no matter how many people. And then there's also that problem of, okay, yeah, we're up against a deadline, and then you're going to add people that have ramp up time and pull, the velocity of the team down, because we've got to bring them up to speed. So there's that kind of, it's subtraction by addition, right?
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
Yes. I think the one word you said that jumped out at me, and this is the same, honestly, for any real business these days, is that why word, right? If people don't know why, they're not as engaged, they're not as motivated, they don't get it, they're not deriving meaning from what they're doing, and you're going to get less out of folks when they don't understand the why. We used to, I don't remember where this was. I don't think it was at Cengage when we worked together, but it was, we would have folks when we were going through like our stand up or our something. I think it was stand up, where you would basically, there would be like kind of an architecture of what we were working on, and everybody would have to go up to the diagram and say, this is me, this is the part of the world that I'm responsible, this is what I'm working on right now, this is where I fit in, and I'm working on this. So everybody understood it, and you were kind of driving that home of what piece do I play. But that's on the very micro level. You also, as you said, as you scale, we get farther and farther disconnected, from the why behind these decisions, and disseminating that. It's a hard thing. And, corporate communications, it's very hard to get that done well.
Yep. When I worked in consulting, we spent so much time talking about the why. And I am sure that people thought we were crazy, right? Outsiders looking in would be like, why are you fit that what I don't understand. Right? That costs so much money to do that. But because we did that, every single person on the team was armed with enough information to question, right? Respectfully question. Hey, this story was prioritized. It says to do X, Y, and Z. But, I'm thinking about it and I'm looking at the flow of how this all pieces together. And I don't think this is going to end up having the right, feel for the end user. What if we did it this way instead? Right. And now we can have a much more dynamic dialogue around, is this the right piece of work to do? And that can sometimes be scary for managers to allow to have happen, but man, like the value you get out of that, it is so, it is, it's hard to put your finger on it, right? And this is where I fail, right? Because I see it and I can't necessarily articulate it very well, but why wouldn't you want a whole team of people armed with the ability to understand why you're building this, what goals you're trying to accomplish, how it all connects together so that everybody can be thinking and working the problem instead of it all being on the leaders,
Right. Yeah,
right?
you have to try to like foresee and think of every single thing. Whereas if you just say the why behind it, then you can kind of crowdsource that, so to speak, right? So
Right,
like you said, if
exactly.
I'm looking at a ticket and I know the why behind what we're really trying to get at, what's the outcome we're looking for, this ticket, this story, if you will, it's not really hitting on. Maybe if we tweaked this a little, I think we'd be better off when we can get closer to that why than this, right? I think that's absolutely helpful.
I actually did this with an offshore team, which generally, like with offshore teams, it was kind of that this is what we want you to do, just go and do it. And they're used to getting that kind of work without feedback. And I took this approach of explaining the why on everything we were doing on this project to them. And at the end of it, they were like, this is probably the best project we've ever worked on because we knew exactly what we were doing and why. And they did. And they were able to come back and give that kind of feedback. It's like, well, what if we did this because it'll accomplish this in a better way? And in it was a wildly successful project. Because of that, and which typically, you say, well, we outsource this, and they're like, oh, so it's not any good, right? It's like a type of thing. It's like, okay, so that's something we're going to have to replace, but this one wasn't. It was kind of this is the way you should do outsourcing type of project, because
Yeah,
I had nobody in house on my team. I was the liaison project manager contact for this project, and all I had was an offshore team that didn't even know the language that we were going to do this in at the start of the project. But by the end of it, it was wildly successful, and it was in a lot of when we were kind of talking through the end of the project, they were like, the reason why we think this was so successful was because we had the full image of what it was and why it was important from the very beginning, and so we could drive ourselves to providing the right solution.
right. People connected to it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that what we all want out of our jobs, right? We
Hmm.
want to
Yeah.
we want to feel connected to the work that we're doing. We want to feel like what we're doing is valuable. We want to feel like we have the ability and the freedom to use our brain on the problem. Um, it, you know, we read all the things. No, we know that it's not money that keep people in their jobs, it's connection to the work that they're doing. So we know this, and we don't spend the time to do it. Um, I talk a lot about to teams about storytelling, right? Storytelling is a great way to get teams to talk about the why without really talking about the why. Right? So you ask the business, come in and walk us through the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Tell the story of what this means to an end user. Tell the story of, I don't know, I'll pick on a call center application if it's internal, right? So this person calls in, they're mad, tell the story about all of that to the team so that the team can then have a greater understanding and context of who they're building this for, what the purpose is. Um, and then you will have armed everybody to help find the right solution.
And you'll get belief behind it too.
Yeah.
Like they'll believe in the product that they're building beyond just doing a set of instructions or working to a requirement. They'll actually believe in it and want it to succeed. So they may even go the extra mile to do something with it. I've worked on a couple projects like that where there was a belief in the motivation for doing the product, and we all kind of got behind it and pushed it forward, even to a fault where maybe we shouldn't have. Sometimes those things,
Yes.
they need to die on the vine because it was not kind of the right direction for the time, or we push a little too hard to get it up because we believed in it so much. But yeah, having that story is very powerful. And speaking of stories, do you have any stories from the trenches of like maybe a good and a bad, maybe a rose and a thorn type story of how some of this worked and didn't work?
Um, so I'll start with a rose. Eh, uh, I'll relate it to you cracked a joke at the start of this about dog agility. I actually worked on a project for a company that runs dog agility program. And I won't get into the details of her story, but suffice to say, she needed us to rebuild her application. And she was a single woman running this business, and she was caught between a rock and a hard place. And we worked very closely with her over several years to help her rebuild her business, and a thriving business. And did it look agile? No. We broke a lot of the rules, but it met her needs, right? And we all knew why we were doing it, and we were all connected to the work that we were doing. It was a very small team. It was maybe 4 or 5 of us at any given time working on this project. And I would say, that's we were all happy doing the work. We were all, we worked well with the client. All the values that are listed in the manifesto were at play, even though it didn't mechanically look the way somebody says it should look.
So you mean like the ceremonies by the
The
book and
ceremonies, yeah, the processes,
yeah.
right? Planning, story card writing, none of it really matched what should be, right? What somebody would say is the right way to do it. And yet it was a very successful project, and the client was very happy. And so I would say, in terms of teams, dare to work the problem of how you build your process, and in the same way as working the problem for delivering value for the business. Make it fit your needs.
Okay, now how about the thorn?
The thorn.
I love the thorn sometimes.
Every other project.
Yeah.
Yeah. The team that I worked with when I was a consultant that had the directive to be 80% agile by the year, whatever year it was. And really the way that played out was to be agile for agile's sake. I was particularly brought in as a consultant to help with the quality assurance team because they were trying to figure out what does this mean for them. And it was so funny. I mean, we go into stand-ups and they'd be walking through the mechanics of it, and then they'd all look at each other, and then they'd look at us and they'd say, why are we doing this? Right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I remember very, very clearly the day. Well, two things. One is in that stand up, I was like, how about we try stand up again and do it this way instead? And when they did that, they were all like, oh, that's what we're supposed to be getting out of this, right? Because I bothered to explain to them what the purpose of stand up was, because they were just told to do stand up. There was a moment in this consulting gig where we were, we had done all these observations. We had been trying to kind of figure out what wasn't quite working. How do we help them? And I was talking to the leaders and I blurted out, because you want your people to think, like you're telling your people to stop thinking and just do. And the whole point of Agile is to get them to think and to actually leverage the fact that you have hired an army, because this organization was huge. You have hired an army of really smart people, and all you're doing is telling them to turn off their brains, stop thinking, and just do. And instead, the whole point of Agile is to ask them to think again. So those two things are completely at odds with each other right now.
Oh yeah.
That's why you have to install the revolving door at the front of the building, is because you're going to end up rotating people a lot when you have that kind of mentality.
And the reason why engineers gravitated towards Agile was because they wanted to think, right? I mean, all of us, the reason why we want that, why we prefer to work under that process is because there might be the hope of us being able to use our brains and applying it to the problems and feel valuable from that.
I think we've broken a few people along the way too, though, because I have had folks that are like, I just tell me what you want me to code.
Yeah.
I just want to sit down and code. We do have those people in the industry. There, I don't think there's a lot, but I think we've broken folks, and to think that that's what software engineering is just sit down, shut up, and do what I tell you to do, code what I tell you to code. Like that, there are people that think that's what we do, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
No, I take the soapbox away from me before I stand on it. There's still a lot I'd want to say on that.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
No, it's a great
I am
topic.
often on a soapbox. It's all right.
All right, we came up with an idea. So one of my favorite answer to somebody as a consultant, we often interact with clients and asking them about their environment. What are they up to? And so, do you guys kind of follow a more agile, or would you say you're more on the waterfall side? And the answer was, this one client was like, "Oh yeah, we're agile. We do stuff real fast." That was their answer. They said, "Oh yeah, we do stuff real fast here." That was my favorite answer of I don't think you get it yet.
Yeah.
Any of those from you guys?
I mean, they're the obvious ones of, we're agile, we can change,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you know that they're using it in more of a negative stance of like change for change's sake.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, yeah, I'm sure I could think of a few others that fall into that category too.
Aaron, what's your favorite?
It, I think it was like, a big scope change. It was like, I thought we were agile.
Yep.
And I'm like, you just can't come in and change everything and expect us to pivot on that without response and delivered to the same date. That was the thing. Oh, I'm going to change all this, but we're not changing the date. And I'm like, you just added like 30% more work. Yeah, we got to change the date. It was like, oh, I thought we were agile. That's not what it means.
Right.
Oy.
Yeah, those misperceptions are very interesting for sure.
So I think at this point, what advice would you give as like, to kind of put a bow on this? What message do you want people to walk away with to move forward in the community?
Read the manifesto often, um, and be pragmatic,
Mm.
right? Don't get caught up in should or shouldn't or, what's right or wrong or any of that. Just take a pragmatic approach.
Oh, I'm going to do a book plug here for
I say,
the
the
Pragmatic
pragmatic.
Programmer.
We hand that book to everybody that walks in the door. Literally,
We're
I always say we have an onboarding program we call Calibrate, and that's one of the things I say: be pragmatic, not dogmatic. Like that's probably one of the best bits of advice I love.
Yeah. So Andrew Hunt and David Thomas are the authors. So
Those sound familiar.
Take that to your Amazon. Get yourself a copy.
Oh, and by the way, those are two names on the Agile Manifesto. By the way, those are two of the names.
Yeah.
That's the signatories.
It's funny. Every time I join a new team, inevitably there's somebody who edges up to the question of, are you going to be dogmatic with us? And you can see the fear, and you can see them like they find like some sideways way of asking it, because they're afraid that I'm going to just swoop in as a coach and suddenly tell them that they're doing everything incorrectly and change their whole world for the just because. And I can catch it every time. And now I'm like, I'm not going to be that person. Don't worry. You know what I mean? And I just call it out because I have no interest in shoving process down your throat just for the sake of it. It's not fun for me. It's not fun for you. So yeah, I find that really telling when I join teams, and that's the pattern I'm seeing.
If ever there was a slogan for the software engineering industry, at least from the software engineer perspective, "You ain't the boss of me," would be that. I think that would be, yeah. All of them would wear that T-shirt. They don't like to be told what to do.
Yeah.
Software engineers don't.
I mean, they're really smart people. They tend to know if you just ask them.
Or they'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, that was great conversation. Thank you, Tracy. We want to move on to our next segment, which is our Ship It or Skip It.
Ship or skip, ship or skip. Everybody, we got to tell us if you ship or skip.
So now we come to the part of our show called Ship It or Skip It, where James and I ask our guests to give their opinions on trends in the technology industry and if they ship it or keep it around or skip it and just get rid of it. So, James, our first topic is
So I came up with a couple. One was there's and it's been around a while, but the whole kind of a movement in the agile world of zero estimates, no estimating whatsoever. Stop doing the estimates. Where are you on that? What do you think about that world?
Skip it.
Okay, say more words.
more words.
Look, I don't, teams shouldn't get hung up on estimates because they really are just estimates. But zero estimates negates the fact that the business really does need to know when something is going to be delivered. And so how else are you going to answer that question?
Mm-hmm.
So
what about you, Aaron?
I'm an asterisk on this one. I say ship it, but you have to have either like a good refinement or planning process in place to ensure that stories are like sized. Because if you're not doing points, you have to go by story count. And so if all stories are not created equal and you don't have a story velocity, then you need to have story points in there. So with the right tooling in place, and I've seen teams do this where they can go by story count, then it could be a ship it. But you have to have a very mature team that knows how to work the requirements in a way that they're predictable in their delivery. So that's my
Yeah,
asterisk. With the right tooling in place, it can be a ship it, but otherwise skip it. You need those points to measure your delivery.
I think the important word that you just said is predictable,
Hmm.
right? The
Yeah.
whole point is be predictable, and however you get there, um, you know,
Yeah. I've
works.
seen, and I think I've seen either counting stories, which is effectively the same thing, or I've seen another team that basically did a kind of an empirical look at it, and they were like, well, our average story size is like with very little standard deviation, blah 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 blah, over a period of time is 5 points. So let's just call everything 5 points. You're effectively counting, right? So you're basically multiplying your count times 5 to get a velocity. I think the bigger issue is, what is it when a measurement becomes the goal? That's the whole problem with
Yeah,
that velocity stuff. It's like, well, you didn't get as many points this time. What's wrong with you? No, this isn't wrong with it. We had production or whatever. There's those whenever you try to blend in things like, okay, well, let's add in a point per day for going to lunch and all that. Like, it's not a timekeeping mechanism. You're just masking the issues when you do that. You try to blend it and make it a nice blended curve. That always messes everything up, and it doesn't achieve what you're looking for. So.
I always tell management that to expect a sine wave type of velocity out of a team because it's going to ebb and flow like a sine wave, and you're going to have certain weeks that you're going to over deliver, and then you're going to have weeks where you under deliver. But in the end, it's going to average out to an average that over time, because if you think about projects, they're not like this is a 1 week project. It's usually months at a
right.
time. Over those months, you're going to see either a level delivery or an increase in delivery. That's your trend line. You want to trend it. You don't want to just base it on a single sprint at a time.
If it's a 1 week project, throw all that crap out the window anyway and just get to work.
Right.
Yeah, right.
You don't need any of
I
that
know.
stuff, right? Like, come
Just
on,
get stuff
just
done.
go get it done. Yeah. All right, you want to do the next one?
Sure. So our next one is, it kind of goes with this that we were just talking about, is measuring software developer productivity. So trying to measure individual developers for productivity.
This comes from that. You remember in 2023, McKinsey. I'm sure you're nodding. You can see you not. You know exactly what I'm talking about. There was a big blow up about this, and then, so I don't know where are you on measuring?
Where am I on that? Yeah, so I tell my teams that this is the one thing that I will die on my sword about. There's no need to measure individual contribution. In fact, it creates so many bad habits across the board. The whole point is to get the team to work together. So I'll use this analogy. Like you're running a relay race. One runner can't finish the whole race by themselves, right? So to measure a single velocity, like that, you're just promoting the one runner to run ahead and leave everybody else behind. And that doesn't actually get us to the value and the goals that we set out to accomplish, because that one person can't do everything.
So just to be clear, you're a skip it.
Yeah, it feels like a skip it. Yeah, feels like a skip it.
I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounded like a skip it. Yeah.
a strong skip it.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo that sentiment almost verbatim, because I've actually had this happen where somebody looked at my personal velocity and was like, I noticed that you clear more points when you're working solo than when you're paired. And I'm like, well, of course I am. When I'm pairing, I'm teaching, right?
Right.
I'm trying to get them to do it in a way that is going to help them in raise the collective watermark, so we all increase our velocity. If I'm working by myself, I don't need to teach myself anything. I'm just going to go do it, right? So there's no, of course, it's going to be, my velocity is going to go down when I'm paired because I'm trying to teach. And
Yep.
it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So, and if you just go by the raw numbers, it's like, well, we can't have him paired because
Right.
he's wasted all this time and not doing work and blah blah blah.
Right.
Because the numbers tell a different story.
Yep. If I complete 5 of my own story points in a sprint, and then I also turned around and helped everybody else move their stories forward, right? Does that mean I only added 5 points of value?
How many people helped you do those 5 too?
Right. And others are helping me. Yeah, exactly. So it's just a useless number, because it fails every time to really tell the true story of what's happening on a team and what somebody's contribution to the team is. If you really want to know what somebody's contribution to the team is, ask the team.
Mm-hmm.
They already know. You don't need data for that.
We tried a concept on trying to capture this that we'd call lift and drag. Like, how did you provide lift to the team by, accelerating it, or how, what were the drags on the team? And it was one of these things, like it was when we did our, the name just escaped me. Retro. We did our retro at the end of sprint. We would always try a different theme, and one of the ones that I always thought was kind of funny was it was a boat retro, and you had
sailboat, yeah.
anchors and in I don't remember, like gusts or something like that.
Yep.
So the things that moved you forward and helped you go forward were your gusts, and then your anchors were your drag items, and capturing those things. I always thought that was an interesting take, because those are the kinds of the things that really lead you to changing what you're doing as a team to try to eliminate those anchors and get more gusts of wind behind your sails to actually move forward. So I thought that was good. So yeah, tracking individuals, hard skip it.
Yeah, this one it is a tough one, because I get where they're coming from, where people are coming from. There needs to be some accountability, because what the business, what the pointy haired bosses here, when we developers say no, I don't want you measuring me. They hear, I don't want to be accountable to anything. I want to just be able to mess around and slough off and not do my job. I think the key to that, to empowering the team, like you all are saying, and measure the team as a whole, is where you have a good cohesive team where they do have that radical candor with one another. Because there are, let's just face it, there are people who don't do their job, but the team has to feel empowered enough to say, hey, Billy, what's going on? You're not coming to stand up every day. You're not, you're not, carrying your weight on the team. That I think they should be able to, vote somebody off the island themselves. The team should be able to say that you shouldn't be on our team anymore. What usually ends up happening, though, is Billy, we'll just use Billy as the example. If he's sloughing off, the other team just pitches in and overcomes the dead weight of Billy, and Billy just gets a free ride for a while. That's a lot. That's what you see a lot of times. And they don't feel empowered to go to Billy and say, hey, how can I help? What's going on with you right now, Billy? You were great for the last 6 months, and now there's a struggle. How can we help? How can we come alongside you? If you can build a team that is truly a team working together and with one another, absolutely, the team-based metrics work.
Maybe we just need the reality TV diary room that everybody can go into, and and then the managers can review it. It's like, oh man, everybody hates Dr. Will for some reason. We might need to get rid of him.
That's a good idea. Oh yeah, these are just for historical purposes. Nobody's reviewing these.
It's just a way for you to vent and deal with the things that you have bottled up.
Yeah.
The camera doesn't even work. We promise.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's just a mirror. There's nobody behind the mirror.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Do we have anything else for Ship It or Skip It today?
I had a lot, but we're keeping Tracy here way too long already. So
okay.
I think we can.
So we will move on to our final segment, the lightning round. So in the lightning round, James and I will go back and forth asking you a series of questions in a rapid fire fashion. These are just short answer questions that are meant to give us a little bit of insight on who Tracy is.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So James, why don't you kick us off?
Again, these are the hard-hitting questions. We say this for
yes.
last. Why can't we tickle ourselves?
Sorry.
I think you tickled her with that question.
but that's not her tickling herself.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Sorry.
I don't either. I don't know.
I just broke my brain on that one.
I don't know the actual answer.
I don't know that I've ever tried.
Do you own a bicycle?
I do. Yes.
That's
let's see. Yeah, we would have also accepted no.
Yeah, right.
Yes. That's a running gag where we have a binary answer, and we do. Anyway. Do you like the name Charlie for a girl?
Yes, actually I do. And in fact, my son's name is Charlie. But I also like it as a girl's name.
Nice.
What temperature do you like your thermostat at?
Currently, it is at 69 degrees, which is kind of warm. I feel like I would probably normally set it to 68.
I'd love to have your electric bill or what a gas bill, man. I got
you don't want the electric bill in the summer at that, because that's where we keep ours at, and that's the AC struggles at times.
Yeah, my AC temperature is different.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going higher on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keep it reasonable. I understand. All right. Would you eat a day-old taquito from 7-Eleven?
No.
Using an Elmo voice, tell me how you would like your coffee.
So my kids are too old. I don't even know what an Elmo voice is these days. I'm like way out of that. But I drink tea.
That's mean. That's mean. You're mean, Aaron.
So watered down is how you like your coffee.
I suppose you could call it that.
Oh gosh. Oh, all right. For journaling, do you like to use actual paper or computer?
Paper. I am a Luddite at heart.
I love it.
A leadite. Oh, I gotta remember that one. I love that. 'Cause I'm the same way. I love the feel of the lead against paper.
Oh yeah.
So since we're all dog people here, is a human life more valuable than the life of a dog?
Uh, I mean, how do you define value?
In story
great.
point.
That's a great advocate answer. Oh, that was perfect. That was great. That was perfect. How many story points is a human life versus a dog? Yeah. And remember, it has to be hours. They equate to hours. 'Cause that's the best way to
Yeah,
do
you gotta
that
tie
too.
that back
Yeah.
to hours.
Yeah.
Hours.
Yeah.
It's 7 times as many for a dog. So there's your answer.
There you go.
Right.
If we go to that, yeah. Anyway. All right. So, have you ever slapped someone in the face?
No. I had to think about that. Not in the face.
Upside the head, maybe.
Little backhand.
Yeah.
Well, that's how I used to keep my little brothers in line. Flip the class ring around and pop them in the back of the head.
Ooh, that's the way
Yeah.
to do it.
I mean, I grew up with 2 older brothers and we were all athletes. So there was a lot of energy in my house.
Physical energy at that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. A lot of physical energy, for sure.
So, would you rather lose all your hair or gain 50% more hair?
I would rather gain 50% more hair.
I've already lost all my hair, so if I could not have to shave, I would prefer that. You know what I mean? Like just let it be bald and not have to. Yeah.
Yeah.
50% more hair, I would look like Bozo the clown.
Would?
Because I would have 50%.
There are ways to contain
hair.
that.
Yeah.
There's products that would help with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I would still just have 50% hair. So there's that.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right. Are we one more? Each?
One more.
Is that where we're at? One more.
The final round.
This is the final round. Okay.
Yeah, you need your little effect there.
Sour Patch Kids or Swedish Fish?
Sour Patch Kids.
Climb a mountain or jump from a plane?
Climb a mountain.
Yeah.
I don't like heights.
Yeah, why jump out of a perfectly good airplane?
Yeah. Seriously. Definitely not.
And mountains are there to be climbed, right?
Yep.
That's their
their whole
purpose.
purpose.
I still have my feet on the ground if I'm climbing a mountain.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You hope.
Yeah.
Unless something
At
goes
least if I'm
horribly
doing-
wrong.
Right. Exactly.
All right, and that
Damn.
completes the lightning round. And you survived.
Yeah, made it all the way through it. That's fantastic. Yeah. Is that the second person so far to make it all the way through?
I think so. Somewhere between 2 and 100. It's at this point. Would you want to give a shout out to anyone? Any final thoughts? Things that have come to you that you would like to plug?
Yeah. Books. So while we're plugging books, I would say Leadership and Self-Deception is one of the most powerful books I have ever read. It turned a light bulb on for me. And I think anybody, well, really anybody in any industry should read this book, especially if you're working on teams of people, which we all are.
It's a fantastic book. It was one of the biggest, like you had to kind of struggle through it yourself with that book.
Yeah.
Like, man, am I a jerk? Like, that's wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like such a slime ball.
I know how to answer that.
And
Ah,
I mean, the reality is sometimes we are, right?
yeah, I mean, unknowingly, I'm not,
Yep,
not on
unknowingly.
purpose. Yeah, no, it's a good book.
All right, and
All right.
if you want to get a hold of Tracy, you can reach her on her LinkedIn at, I lost the, here it is, at linkedin.com in Tracy-Beeson, that's Beeson, Tracy with a Y, not an IE.
Or just an I.
Or just an I. Yeah.
Yep, just
With,
why.
if you have it with just an I, you have to dot it with a heart.
And it's not like TRAYSEE or anything.
Yeah,
like
you know,
it's
it's
the normal
TRACY.
Yeah,
Just
the
keep
normal
it simple.
spelling. Yeah, exactly. Keep it simple.
Well, I'd like to thank Tracy for her time today in speaking with us about not speaking about Agile and what that means. And hopefully you have gleaned some information. Join us next time. We'll be talking to someone about technology in the construction space. So that should be an interesting conversation.
Absolutely.
I'd like to thank our listeners. Please subscribe, rate, and share the / with your friends. They might not be friends after you do, but let's hope they are.
Wow.
If you'd like to reach us at the / you can do so by email at the / at caliberty.com. I'd like to thank Tracy one more time, my beautiful co-host, James, and I am Aaron Chesney. Thank you, and stay curious.